Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We'll be engaging in stimulating conversations every week.
We want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding.
These conversations and the associated language can be triggering.
Listen at your own discretion.
But please reach out if we need to be doing something better.
So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome. Tim, who are we talking to this week?
This week we have a very special guest, somebody who matters to us a lot. Our guest is ourselves.
The hosts of No Streetlights podcast. Aaron Ash and Timothy Brunacardi.
Beer, 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 beer.
Devoted listener, this is your season 1 recap. We're going to talk about what season 1 was, what season 2 is going to be, and what we're doing, and how we feel about our episodes.
Or, as we like to put it, what we've been through, how it changed us, and what we learned. I'm telling you right now, before we get started into this, the learning curve on the things that we had to figure out for this to actually become like a cohesive project is probably more than I expected it to be. Way more than I expected it to be quite honest.
I only now feel like we're starting to get a handle on it. And even last night, I panicked. I was editing episode 4, and episode 3 needs to be mastered for today so we can upload it, and everything will be cleared within the 48-hour window for Apple for us to drop on time. I was freaking out last night, sitting in the den, editing the episode, and my wife is like, come to bed, like it's bedtime. And I was like, babe, probably gonna have to pull an all-nighter. I've got to edit episode 4 for Tim because he's got to master it tomorrow so we can have everything uploaded. She was like, dude, you guys got to get ahead of schedule. You guys need to be working on next week's episode. And I sat there and I thought about it for a second, and I went, that literally is what I'm doing. So I took my ass to bed.
Good move. Good. I was wondering too, because you sent me a couple voice messages earlier, and one of them was saying that you planned on being up most of the night.
Yep.
I thought it was going to be for like personal reasons or whatever. Like you wanted to, I don't know, you were reading a book or meditating or something.
Nope.
But editing
freaking out.
Next week's episode, that's hilarious.
Yep.
You know what? We've talked about it a lot on previous episodes, but I feel like for the season 1 recap, the best thing to do is for us to start at the beginning, man.
I am on board with that because we have learned through season 1 and now season 2 that the correct format is yes and.
Yes and, yeah. Whenever we sat down to make this podcast, Aaron, I'm going to tell you what I thought was going to happen versus what actually happened, okay? So I'm going to start this out, and then you can tell me what you thought was going to happen. We recorded, and I'll be honest, I thought we were just going to slap the audio together, throw music at the beginning, throw music at the end, and upload it, right? That's all what I thought the editing was going to be. Because I thought Aaron and I, we've known each other for 19 years. Our chemistry is great. We know how to keep a conversation flowing. We can talk to each other perfectly fine. And that's essentially what the idea for the podcast was, is we were just going to talk to each other about what we've been through, how it changed us, and what we've learned. And that is not at all what ended up happening, because
No.
Getting behind the mic for the first time, I was like, damn, how do I talk?
Yeah, what do I talk about?
I was like, I feel like I've been through a lot of things in life, and I feel like I can tell people how it's changed me, but do I have words? What
it's
are
like
words?
when that hilarious fellow runs up to people on the street and is like, name one woman. And they're like,
All of a sudden, you've never met a woman in your entire life. And all of a sudden, I've never had a conversation in my entire life. So I did not know what to do, what to say. There were pauses. There were a lot of the filler words. E, It sounded like I was doing my own version of the alphabet, you know.
Just vowels. Oh, so I would love to talk about words that I hate now that I edit a podcast. Not only do I hate I hate so, I hate like, I hate because I really hate all of, and it's radically changed the way I speak. I don't do filler word. I'm thinking 2 sentences ahead. I'm focused on not having a natural respiratory pause longer than 0.8 seconds, as Hyland said, is about the normal break between. And even whenever I do drop a filler word like so, I'm thinking about chopping it. Already, I'm starting fresh. You know, that clean slate that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And so I no longer say, as you were saying earlier, Tim, no, because I don't need to validate what I'm saying by qualifying it with what you said earlier. And so it's really spiked my confidence in my speech, which has radically changed the way I approach life in general.
Yeah, and
So
as you were saying earlier,
yeah, like
because
insofar
of
as
what, like, so yeah, no, I think since I've stopped editing the podcast, I've actually become lazier in how I speak, and it's probably super,
no comment.
super prevalent. Yeah, I'm sure you hear it a lot whenever you're doing that, because whenever I was doing the same thing when I was editing, I was like, damn, I need to make sure that I have less stuff that I have to worry about whenever I'm going through and editing. So I'm going to get rid of as many of the filler words as I can, like mentally think about it. But now I become more focused in on the conversation and less about exactly what I'm saying and focusing a couple of sentences ahead. I've become lazier with thinking about how I want to express words, and I just want to say something. I just want to express something.
I want to point out that it's easier to cut around someone who's speaking naturally because they give their ums space. But once you're speaking professionally, you don't want to have that gap in time. So you tie in your to your words so that it's impossible to cut. It becomes, as I was saying, and then when you're
Yes.
trying to chop the wave, it's just one cohesive noise. So if you cut it, it sounds so unnatural.
Yeah, there's a weird chop there at the beginning. But all of these were things that we had no idea about before when we sat down, you know?
We need to go back and master like all of season 1 at some point. Maybe like during a holiday break, I'll do that.
We're going to get to it because my vision for how I want to discuss this is going down, essentially going through the episodes, even if we don't have a lot to say on the episode itself. But there's a couple episodes that I honestly just kind of want to remove them, but we'll get to that. So we recorded season 1 for the first time we ever sat down and recorded, and I went through and edited every single pause out of there to where it just became almost essentially just a complete run-on sentence every time we were talking. It sounded unnatural, but I didn't know any better, right? I was like trying to figure out exactly what I wanted this to sound like, and I was watching some videos. And
Well, you were
things,
trying to prepare it like a book, I think. You wanted just the words to be consistent. We're speaking to you.
in my mind, I was thinking if I was listening to something while I'm driving, I don't want there to be a pause, because if I'm engrossed in the story, then that's kind of all I can focus on. But if there's a pause, then something else is going to come in and break up the flow of it. That's how I thought. Kind of like what you're saying, a story, but almost like an audiobook, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, I over-edited the first time, and I realized it halfway through because I think I still have it somewhere on my external drive here. But the first half was heavily edited, and then the second half was not edited almost at all.
At all.
And I sent it to Aaron. I sent it to you, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And then I
was
told
like,
you
did
what
a
I
great
did.
job.
Yeah,
I didn't look at it. You did amazing.
yeah, phenomenal job. Good work, man. Good work. So we decided to re-record after hearing what I had done to the audio, and I guess we could have just skipped on the re-recording. We probably could have just saved ourselves a whole recording thing.
We could have saved ourselves a lot of things had we known then what we know now. Oh well, I'll cry about learning.
I want to say the reason why we re-recorded was because we listened to it and we both decided that there was a lack of direction in our first recording.
Yes, it was meandering. It was just
Yeah.
us talking for an hour.
Yeah, like we literally took the idea of us being on a phone call with each other, recording it, and then trying to post that, and I don't think it worked out for us.
No.
So what we ended up doing was recording a second time, and I remember us getting off of that call and being like, that felt good. Yeah, like I felt like we did a good job there, and we were stoked, you know?
And then both our audios didn't save or something, right?
Yeah, both of our audios were just fucking gone.
Yep.
No, something was wrong. I know for a fact my audio was jacked, and I don't know what happened with your audio. I think it ended up getting deleted or something.
Or maybe the gain was, I set the gain just naturally to like medium.
Oh, yeah,
And it
yeah,
turns
yeah,
out I yell all the time.
yeah.
So I
And
think every word was blowing out my mic.
Yeah, so the audio was completely unusable if we even had audio, which was a damn shame because we really liked that recording.
Yeah, it had great direction.
It did, yeah. So we took what we learned from the past two episodes, we sat down and we recorded the third time, and that one is the one that ended up getting published that everybody got to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is still our most popular episode. When we look at the analytics, it has the most plays. It seems to be the one that everybody was most hype about whenever we first discussed coming out with the podcast.
And everyone wants to start at the beginning, so they start with episode 1.
And somehow, some way, they end up dropping off after like episode 3.
And we find our voice on episode 5.
Yep.
So they listen to us meander for a couple times, and then they say, no thank you.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to cultivate an audience from 0 instead of our initial 100 listeners. Another thing, I have to address my mother's issues with episode 1. My mom listened to 2 minutes of the audio and then messaged me about how heartbroken she was that I said she had severe mental illness. Because our parents' generation, people in their 60s, think of mental illness as what they called mental retardation. And I had to explain that that's not what I meant, that those of us around the age of 30 and younger, we see mental illness as like trauma, damage to your brain, and that we don't blame people for that. We don't blame people for being born with a different number of chromosomes or any type of severe autism. We accept them and we love them. So instead of trying to hide our traumas, we try and accept each other and respect each other's traumas. So she thought I was calling her the word we try to avoid now. So I had to clarify that I was just saying she'd been through a ton of trauma and was trying to heal and learn how to view the world correctly. And after a few discussions, we got through it. And she's coming on the podcast here soon. So stand by for that.
That's so good. And I'm very excited about that as well. My mom hasn't figured out how to listen to the podcast yet, which is a shame because I feel like I give her quite a bit of accolades through some of our episodes talking about how she was essentially a single mother raising us.
Yes.
And we turned out pretty good. Minus like we have our traumas, but that's not necessarily related to or directly connected to how she raised us. That's just
you
life.
guys have to spend a bunch on hair products to keep your hair from getting greasy, but that's just your Italian heritage.
Episode 1 dropped. It was super hype. Everybody, all of our friends began messaging us and talking to us about like they didn't know that we had gone through that or things like that of that nature had happened to us.
Yes.
And we were getting a lot
I'm
of
so sorry I treated you the way I did. I didn't know you were going through life as well.
yeah, which is great. We got interaction from people. I had people message me that I hadn't talked to since I got out of high school. I never went to college. What do
I
look
had
like?
people hit me
Rich?
up from elementary and junior high too. Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. It's because of the first episode that I've been able to reconnect with some of the people that I haven't spoken to in so long. Shout out to my friend Alex, Chris, Leon. I've been in contact with him on and off over the years, but I feel like I have had more of a stronger bond with him now. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that since we've been discussing things that we've gone through and how it's changed us and what we've learned, we're expressing more of a mature side of ourselves that a lot of people just haven't had the opportunity to see because we've been gone for so long. I almost never go to West Virginia anymore, and I almost never see any of my old friends. I definitely don't talk to them, and I almost never post on social media these days. So people really have no idea what I'm about anymore. And I think discussing these topics has really shown people like, wow, this he's not just a freaking thing. Like, he's grown up, he's matured, and I have as well. And we should talk again, reconnect.
And being a severe extrovert, people, every time they see me, it's, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Hey, check this out. Let's go do this. So they're like, oh, snap, you were going through things at home and you were worried about this and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a whole other person. I'm not just someone you see for, I don't exist for those 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Where I'm ecstatic and happy. You know, I do go through depressive episodes. I do have huge struggles and everything. And that's why, as we kind of went through this, that's where we wanted to steer, was into the light.
Yeah. It took us about, like you said, we found our voice on episode 5. I think episode 6 and 7 was where we really started bouncing off of the high of each other, which was incredible. There was a lot of discussion we had to have between episode 1 and 2. And a lot of it came down to kind of my envisionment for a podcast. I was pitching the idea that 1, we needed to create a skeleton that we should follow. And 2, we needed to bring in something like knowledge so that people would have information to take away from the podcast, like they learned something from the hour that they sat down and listened to us.
You wanted to be an expert.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's kind of what I thought. I was like, we should at least be well-versed in what we're talking about, because if we're going to talk about depression on this episode, we should bring statistics into it. How many people have depression or reportedly have depression? How do people treat it? How do they know? How can they diagnose it? And it just, we're laymen. Like, we understand this now, but at the time, that was kind of where I pushed for us to go. So that was, I think we did that for 2, 3.
We tried it a few times.
Yeah.
And even 2 and 3, we did steer more towards experiential conversation.
We did. It was episode 2, Leadership Theory, where we had a bunch of stuff brought up. Or I'm sorry, I had a bunch of stuff brought up on my screen about what's a leader, what's considered a toxic environment, things of that nature. So this way
here's this article I'm citing, here's that article I'm citing.
Yes. So yeah, it was a lot of that in episode 2 and 3. Those are the ones that are sticking out to me the most. So that's why episode 2, Leadership Theory, I feel like there's so much good information in Leadership Theory. And to this day, that is still the episode people cite to me as the one where they took the most notes. But that's coming from people who are in the military, who have leadership positions. And they think to themselves, or they tell me that they've never thought about the platinum rule, or how to treat people how they want to be treated, or just in general, how to not be a toxic leader.
Yes. I've had a lot of great feedback where people are just saying girl same and having slight tweaks, like my buddy Jesse, who I've talked about several times, who doesn't want to come on the podcast at this juncture because they live a fairly private life. But they've said, instead of focusing on compassion, I focus on giving people purpose. My friend James will probably come on the podcast at some point, and he said, I love being given the people that aren't worth a damn. Like, give me all the shitbags, because I'm going to show them that they're worth it. And then they're going to work harder than anyone else. And I've seen that. Every time I arrive someplace and I tell people, like, I'm a hard charger, I'm motivated, I'm squared the fuck away, they give me the shit section. And I transform it. Because all of those people are amazing human beings who just aren't being recognized.
Yeah, there was a lot of very important very good knowledge in the leadership theory episode. And I would love to revisit it later too.
Yes.
I think there's more things we could discuss there, but I did really like that episode. Kind of going back into what I was saying, the statistics and numbers and everything that we were bringing up at this point was something that we were trying out. And that kind of ended up fading away in later episodes. Once we get to like episode 3, Marriage Finding the Balance. So I remember the conversation we had before we recorded this one, our brainstorm session for this episode. And a lot of it had to do with making sure we talk about something that, like, communicating with our spouses about what we should discuss on there, what we should not discuss on there. I know there was a lot of conversations with Brittany before we sat down to record this episode. Like,
oh yeah, we had huge privacy conversations.
yes, that was one really big thing, which is why we refer to our spouses by wife B and wife A for a good majority of the season 1, because well, we were intending on keeping them out of the podcast, kind of keeping our private life private.
They love our podcast and want to be a part of it. So not only is your wife helping us work with art direction and logo design, soon we're going to have wife episodes. And you have now introduced your wife. I have not yet introduced my wife. But when I do, she gets to decide to what extent she's on the podcast.
Yeah. I'm really glad that we're going towards that, and that our significant others are actually taking an interest in this, because this has become a massive part of our lives. The podcast in general, we spend a good majority of our days either you're cutting or chopping or editing. I'm sitting down mastering. We both are discussing, recording, whatever it may be.
And the amount of planning on my part is disgusting. The calendar is insane. I can't wait to go over the calendar.
Yeah, that's something that I want to give a huge shout out to Aaron too at this juncture, because it's the way he describes himself every time we discuss this with somebody else is he's the idea guy. And that's almost perfect what it is, because he is the idea guy. He comes up with the ideas. I essentially lean on him a lot too when it comes to things like the episode descriptions, because he's better at grammar than I am. I don't really care about grammar. I'm all about just saying what it is and typing it out.
I do love words, and I have a beautiful delivery most of the time.
And me personally, I just don't care about words.
Yeah,
I can read them.
Here's my episode.
Yeah, here it is. Love it, right? But Aaron's the idea guy, so he comes up with the majority of the skeleton, and I kind of fill in I don't know what you would call it.
The way my wife and I work together is the same way you and I work together. One of us does the main project, like the 80%, and then we hand it off, because we can't, once you've done the bulk of stuff, you can't possibly do the last 20%.
Yeah.
So you need someone to be like, hey man, here, please finish this and make it exist. I do the rough shaping, and then I hand it to you and I go, I don't know what temperature the oven needs to be. I don't care what kind of glazing needs to go on it. Please just sell this fucking vase.
Yeah. And that's at this point on episode 3, we hadn't reached that working relation yet.
Nowhere near.
Yeah, at this point, it was a lot of you taking care of like the typing up stuff, the words. You were doing the grammar, and I was doing the editing, and then we were having Hyland master the episode at that time.
Which he made very clear he did not want to do.
Yeah.
So he was like, I'm going to teach you guys how to edit and master, because I'm not doing it for you.
And
this is not my podcast.
Huge shout out to Hyland. We do it in every single episode, but there's a reason why. Hyland was the literal backbone to us getting started. The music that he provided us is incredible. We love it. We plan on using it.
Until we die. At least till we die.
Yeah. The music that Hyland gave us is incredible. And he went above and beyond mastering each and every single episode for us at this juncture. He would download all the audio, do everything he needed, then re-upload it, which to his credit, for me, if he was doing it on a Wi-Fi connection that's similar to mine, actually, I'm not running Wi-Fi, I'm running direct Ethernet. Uploading and downloading is a whole day event. It takes forever for me to get my audio downloaded, mastered, and then re-uploaded. Like I'm talking probably a good 3 to 4 hours to have everything done, just because the file sizes are so huge. And this man's over here doing whatever job he is doing for the day or whatever.
He's an engineer, by the way.
Yeah. He's got a lot of stuff going on. So he downloads the audio, masters it, which the mastering process can take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on how much you have to edit, change, cut around, and stuff like that.
And how shitty the audio you're given is, which guess what?
God. Yeah. Our audio at the beginning.
What?
God. So that man's a wizard.
Aaron, you've blown out every word you've ever said.
And Tim, I don't know what's going on with your audio, but there's a plosive every other word. And I was like, what the fuck is a plosive?
Yeah.
So
he was like, you talk wrong. And then you got real self-conscious for a while.
Yeah. I became super formal. Actually, I hear it too, and it bothers me because of my lisp. And I hated listening to my audio at the very beginning. Now I've learned to ignore it, but I did become super self-conscious there for a long time.
I know when we were chopping through the intro, you kept making sure that your talking bits didn't have a bunch of S's because you were so self-conscious about your lisp.
Yes, I remember that. Oh my God.
You were like, maybe we can change this or that. And I'm so happy that our intro and outro has become so concise. I'm really happy we were able to refine it as much as we have, as quickly as we have.
Yes. And there's something else too that we have yet to discuss before we dive into the rest of episode 3 here. Ads.
Oh my God.
That was the biggest thing. I think that was me pushing that too. So I kept pushing this idea of what our podcast needed to sound like. And to me, right, to make it sound more professional, it needed to have ads in it. So we came up with scripts for our ads. I'm looking at the BetterHelp ad right now.
Yeah, they're aggressive.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, like, we went through so many different iterations of this. Editing it, we would have to talk about after the fact, like, oh man, hey, so do you think the ad could fit in right here where you say da-da-da-da-da, but first, an ad from our sponsor.
Yeah.
And it was strange. It didn't work as much as we'd like it for our ads to actually fit into the episodes. A lot of the times it just didn't really work out, especially having a script going off of it. So,
and everyone thought we were getting paid immediately because we were sponsored immediately. But so far, our podcast has made us $0. I want to be very clear.
Yeah, there's been absolutely
everyone's
no money.
Like, wow, you guys got sponsored?
Yeah,
you guys are getting paid? No, those are two different things.
Yeah,
those are two totally different
There has been no return on investment on this podcast, which is fine because we're essentially doing this because we love to talk about it. And
because it's good karma.
And Aaron's always wanted to record himself talking.
Oh my God. If everyone in the world hears me, I'll need to find another planet to start sending my voice to.
And I think after a certain amount of time, we're going to make these documents available for people on our Patreon.
Yes.
Where they can actually go through and see what we're looking at while we're discussing these episodes.
We already have the tiers set up.
Yeah. If you look at the season 1, episode 3, Marriage, Finding Balance, we have text in green and blue. So I think what had happened here, because there's a very distinct difference between the green and the blue text here, we did this separately. We discussed during our brainstorm session, hey, we should talk with our spouses, see what they're comfortable with us talking about, and then we'll take notes on it and add it into the drive later.
And you wanted an outline where we talk about this point, then this point, then this point. So I made that happen via these notes, and I made it simic for us, blue and green.
I was so obsessed with the idea of like making sure that the podcast was very much like structured a specific way. So my notes on the earlier episodes are hella big. Like,
yes,
there's just so much going on here to the point where it's like, I don't even think we ended up discussing all of this necessarily.
we didn't discuss everything that was written down. We ended up going over about, I've already cleaned up the document. We ended up going through about half of the things that we talked about, and it was giving you very visible anxious symptoms because I was making it flow naturally. So we'd talk about the first point, and then we would jump down to like the 8th point, and then we'd jump back up to like the 3rd point, and you were like getting stressed out. But I was adding notes so that we knew we had talked about this point. We knew we had talked about this point because it was fleshed out with more words.
Yeah.
And then we could say, okay, what hasn't been discussed yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we hit an hour and we were like, okay, let's be done. Please.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, obviously, never doing a podcast, I kind of just thought this is how it was supposed to be done, is like create this very strict structure so we know exactly how the episode layout's going to be. People always know what they're getting from us and whatnot. And that could be a good or a bad thing, but ultimately, I was nuking it. That's kind of just what it comes down to.
And episode 4 is where you took on the knowledge of the word extemporaneous, which I had been saying every time we went to record. I was like, yeah, I just want it to be really extemporaneous. Just us, we're just talking. And you're like, I don't know I don't know what that means. Say it in English. And I was like, yeah, we're just talking. And you're like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Why would people listen to that? We need to bring information.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we have experiences. You were like, bullshit. Tell me one experience you've had.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was just coming down from like the confidence of being on, just talking. Because a lot of the things that were going through my mind was, who the fuck wants to listen to my life? What happened to me that is so interesting? And that's just how that's just how I was viewing everything. Is like nothing I've gone through was actually interesting enough to keep people's attention for an hour and that they would want to listen to it. So I wanted to sprinkle in a little bit of my life, but mostly be talking about statistics, facts, information, bullet points, referencing articles and stuff like that. That's kind of what I think was going through my mind. And then we started getting feedback on episodes from our friends. And I started realizing that, damn, people actually care about what we're talking about. Like, they're listening to what we are talking about. They're not referencing the statistics when they tell us that they liked the episode. They're referencing things that we just discussed. Like the leadership theory episode, nobody talks about how, they're so glad that they got to learn whatever points make up a toxic leader. They're more so happy just to discuss, oh man, so that's how the platinum rule works. That's a great idea. That's great.
Yeah, I thought I just had to yell at people.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I should ask people what they're going through.
I just loved that people actually cared about what we were talking about versus what we were trying to teach them. And that's whenever I think the confidence started shifting from the whole idea of the podcast needs to be facts and based and referencing things and whatnot to just, hey, this is our topic. This is what we're discussing. This is what we know.
And that's why 1.4, whenever you get access to the notes, because you're all going to sign up for Patreon, obviously, it's all blue because Tim was riding such a high. He was like, we're just going to talk about friendship.
Yep. I feel like 1.4 was a good episode.
It was. It is.
In the sense of recording, I feel like it was a good episode. We were almost there where we found our voice, but we just weren't quite there yet. We still meandered a lot, which was a huge problem. We digressed. And
yes.
I don't feel like there's too much to talk about 1.4. Like, in my mind, I kind of wish it had more views than it does, but it's fine. I feel like we could go back and talk about friendship again at another point. And one thing that I was really big on in that episode was talking about not letting your emotions fester. And it just saves you so much heartache and issues later on. And I really think that's something that people should be digesting and taking in and considering. That's kind of the only thing I really got to say on 1.4.
1.4, I was super stoked to talk about because I fucked up my wedding speech. My post-wedding speech, I was woefully underprepared. My wife was like, oh, hey, we're doing our speech. And we've talked a couple times about how busy my wedding was. So I had no idea where my notebook was with my lovely speech. So I wanted to express my lovely speech that I posted all over Facebook and stuff too. Then we scratched an episode pretty aggressively.
Yeah, so after the friendship episode, what I don't remember what the thought process was for this. I think we were kind of, because we had created this list at the very beginning of the podcast of things that we should discuss.
Topics, yeah.
And one of them was toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And I felt like that was something that we should talk about. But wow, I don't know anything about toxic masculinity.
So we realized very quickly that we weren't qualified to educate people about toxic masculinity just because we had experienced it. And
Yeah.
one thing I really want to remark on, up to this point, through episode 4, before we reached episode 5, our communication was dog shit. We were not able to communicate back and forth as well as we are now because we hadn't given constructive criticism to someone we loved and cared about something that was this important and had this much blood, sweat, and tears put into it. So whenever I would say, hey, Tim, I think you should maybe smile when you talk to sound more friendly. Feel like you're talking to Leon and Matt and you are Tim.
Well, I do talk to myself.
So, yes, and that's a sign of a healthy brain. People should not be ashamed of that stuff.
Yep. Our communication was dog shit. And there was a time during the recording of this scratched episode where Aaron essentially just jumped in and was like, it sounds like you're supporting toxic masculinity. And I was like, who the fuck?
Yeah.
I got really upset. And I think that kind of threw off the vibe on top of the fact that we just weren't qualified to talk about it or to educate about it.
I don't have a degree in gender studies.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just going off of what I had done through a couple Google searches and notes I had taken. And ultimately it wasn't going anywhere. The conversation felt terrible. And during the editing, because I was still chopping at this point. So during the chopping for this, we had maybe 20 minutes worth of something that somebody would want to listen to, and the rest of it just sounded awful. And like we have a question down here at the bottom of our notes that says, what is our role in toxic masculinity? Like it was stuff like that I think that I was pushing for a lot in the earlier episodes too. How does it impact society? Where did it come from? Is it a modern concept? And all of these things.
Whereas I was like, I want to talk about the picture of Liam Hemsworth snuggling with his boys from Avengers on the couch. And you were like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I
have no idea how to express a picture.
I was like, I don't know what that photo is. I've never seen it, but snuggle the boys, I guess. Like that's, what is there to discuss here? Just, don't be scared to show love and emotion to your boys. So actually there was one thing that we talked about. I don't remember if it was in the toxic masculinity or if it was in the Friends episode.
What's that?
It was the idea of saying I love you to your friends.
I think that was episode 4. I've listened to our discography like 5 times.
Yeah.
And by 5, I mean 2 or 3 times.
Episode 3 and 4 are some of my favorite episodes to go back to, but the later episodes are the ones I tend to re-listen to the most. So I can't remember exactly. But yeah, so if it's not in episode 4, then I'm going to just say it now. I'm going to go on record here. Don't be scared to say I love you to your friends. If they're a male or a female or whatever. Obviously make sure that, the boundaries are understood and everything whenever you say that, but love your friends. There's nothing wrong with that. Life's too short not to.
Yes, and if you're telling one of your buddies that you love them, and they're like, what, you love me? You should be like, yes, I love you and you deserve to be loved.
Yeah.
And then they can react however they want, but you've done your part of being honest and communicating what's happening in your reality.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. I tell my friends I love them, so.
I do too. About 3/4 of our phone calls, it's like, I love you, bye.
Yeah.
So,
there's a couple where we don't.
Yeah, and normally that's business calls where we're flustered about something and we're like, all right, man, I'll call you back. Click.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, we'll get to that a little bit later.
Oh,
So,
good heavens. I can't wait to talk about how embarrassed I am. Do you want to talk about 5?
yeah, I think jumping to 5 is going to be the best thing.
So 5 is a beautiful episode.
It is.
5, we talked to my dad, who is currently working through a cancer scare. His PSA scores are up around the 12 and a half neighborhood. He planned on just dying quietly on his hill. And I was like, no, that's not how this is going to happen. And he said he didn't want to do any traditional chemo treatments. He didn't want a biopsy. He didn't want chemo because he had seen it ravage the people around him. And so I found hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is just feeding oxygen into your body so that it repairs every cell that needs repaired. It's just jamming oxygen, which heals your cells, into all of them. And he started feeling better. He was able to get around better, and he realized that a lot of his pain and suffering was self-induced. And so he realized, maybe I'm feeding the cancer by jamming oxygen into my body, which one of my friends stated that cancer thrives in an oxygen-deprived environment. So if you oxygenate it, the cancer can't do as well, which may be true. I'm not sure. I'm not a doctor. And I'm not going to say that it's true or not. I'm going to wait till we have a doctor come on and talk to us about it. So we just talked about what we were going through, how we were getting through it. And this is where we embodied vulnerability. There were several tears shed during this episode. Everyone who's listened has insinuated that they cried, if not outright told us they cried.
Yeah.
Or said, when Forrest is saying his ABCs, I barely held it together, is the most common remark we get. But that has taught me that throughout my days, I go through my days actively with a mantra. It's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but it's very close.
This episode 5, it's very special to me because I got to know your dad a lot more on this episode. And I'd met him a little bit in the past, and we had talked a little bit. And I kind of understood what he was about, but I didn't really, him and I weren't on texting conversations or anything. I think the most time I'd ever spent with him was when I dropped Charlie off.
Yes. He was just the large man over there.
Yeah, terrifying. I heard stories of the mountain bear, and that was about it.
And you shook his hand when you met him, and it was like the size of a child, so you were like, oh, God.
Yeah. So I didn't really know a whole lot about Forrest, and when he came onto the episode, the stuff he was saying it was beautiful. And hearing him talk about his story, I related to it so much because, not to the same extreme, but I felt it. I felt what he had gone through. I know that there was only a couple choices in my life different than his that allowed me to be where I am now versus me being him.
He talks about how angry he was and how he would hold his breath and do this and do that. And we can all relate because that's like the angriest you've ever been. Those moments were so crystal clear to him.
Like everything that he had been through, all the struggles he had faced, all the hardships he had faced, that could be anybody. That could be me. And I saw myself in his story a lot. And then he started talking about the cancer. And man, it was hard. It was very hard for me. I choked back some tears, and it was sad. It was very sad hearing his story and hearing what he's facing right now. If there's another episode, actually, scratch that. Episode 5 is the episode that I wish had like 20,000 views or 20,000 plays, and then the marriage and friend episodes can come on underneath those. But
we should rank our episodes. We should have a tier list.
That's a great idea.
That'll be another episode. Let's go.
Yeah. But episode 5, Into the Forest, which, by the way, beautiful name, because there was so many. That's another thing that we haven't talked about yet. Naming the episodes.
Oh, God.
Whenever we first started getting the idea of naming the episodes, I kind of wish we had kept a list of the original ideas going down to. So the leadership theory, that was an episode that we actually changed the name on.
Yes.
Because it was originally called military leadership theory.
Leadership theory. There were several reasons I pushed for that change, if I may, Tim. I do think it pigeonholed us to where people thought this only applies to me if I'm in the military. And I wanted to be very clear that everything we were talking about was just as applicable no matter what community you were in. If you're a leader or if you work with people, you need to know these skills. You need to know that you have to be compassionate. You have to ask people what they're going through. And you have to realize where they're coming from.
So yes, going to episode 5, Into the Forest, there was a couple of different ideas that were thrown out there about what to call the episode. Because I remember I was cooking in the kitchen and I looked over to Brittany and I was like, hey, so these are the ideas for the next episode. And I said whatever they were. I think there was 2 or 3 of them. And she said Into the Forest. She was like, that one sounds like magical. And I was like, I completely agree. I love that.
Yes, naming the episodes has been a lot of fun for me. It was challenging at first because we hadn't found our direction, but after that, it just started rolling.
Yeah, it just started happening a lot easier. The episode description started becoming a little bit more because we started talking
to develop
about
the formula.
Yeah, it was just working. It was good. And then episode 5, recording it was heavy, and
yes.
We decided to kind of take a break from heavy discussions. So that brings us to episode 6, which was our fireside chat, where I feel like we wanted to come in and have like a check-in on ourselves.
And we also were trying to find our direction insofar as if we were going to be a show where we had a guest every show or where we talked to each other, we talked about what we were going through, because that initial intro was what we've been through, how it changed us, and what we learned, yeah. But now we're talking more about shining light, sharing the commonality. And so episode 6, we wanted to take a breath. Tim was concerned about me. I was concerned about Tim. And we didn't want it to become this like heart-wrenching bullshit where like we're trying to get people to cry every episode. We didn't want it to become fake. So we started talking about direction in a fireside chat.
And it was a great opportunity for us to be able to kind of just check in with each other, let everybody know where our minds have been and everything. The fireside chat, in my opinion, is a very good and underrated episode. But there's something about the episode. People just don't really talk about it. Out of all the conversations I've heard people have, or the conversations people have had with me about the podcast, nobody really talks too much about the fireside chat. I think Jason was one of the only ones who actually like even asked a question about it.
I think that's because a lot of people are kind of like Hyland. He said that he kind of expects us to have a direction, expects us to go somewhere, to be constantly pushing towards, accomplishing the mission or what have you. Whereas the Hangout Lounge is laid back. It's, hey, what's going on? What have you been into? What do you want to talk about? And Hyland is used to being a businessman who's like, hey, we have 15 minutes. Let me get the elevator pitch. What's going on?
Yeah, let's get to the point. Let's talk about what we're talking about. Give me the information I want. I clicked on this episode for a purpose. So where's the fireside?
So episode 6 is a Hangout Lounge style episode where we just talk about what's up.
Yep.
Which was really nice. And then we decided that we wanted to really shine a light, tell our story. We decided that's, episode 5, that's what we were bringing to the table, was being vulnerable, being open, talking about what we were going through. So then episode 7 is Put in Work, where I start talking about my philosophy for how to keep going. We talk about resiliency and dedication.
Episode 7 is one of my favorite episodes, personally.
You've said that about every episode.
What can I say, man? I love our project. But
yes, I also love it.
Okay, so each episode has something that I do love about them. But there is a moment in the podcast, there was this aha moment.
Episode 17, there was a moment where you said, "What the fuck is up, Kyle?"
So yeah, episode 7 has that moment where Aaron and I finally realized what we were talking about. We got on the same groove, the same wavelength, the same brain area, and we thrived in that moment for a good 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about the high at the end of a podcast episode,
yes,
Aaron, you and I stayed on the phone for like a solid hour afterwards, which usually we do about almost like a cool down, I guess.
30 if we're not doing anything.
Yeah, but we were on there for an hour, which is to this day is still the longest we've remained on the phone after recording.
Maybe. I've been popping off pretty early because I've been booking stuff like back to back to back to back.
Yeah, you have a schedule and you follow your schedule. For me, we always record in the evening, so I have nothing else after the episode except going to bed. So so put in the work, has that aha moment, and it still stands out as one of my favorite moments that we have had together during this journey.
That's beautiful. I need to go back and listen for that. Comment the timestamp if you're still with us.
Yeah. Again, right, as a listener, it's hard to determine, but there's this moment where I explained to Aaron that I'm trying to reach a certain group of people, and he goes, "Thanks for reinforcing that to me."
Yes. We were trying to express the same thing, but it sounded like we were shouting in two different directions. I'm going off about A, you're going off about B, but really we were talking about what A and B make.
I think that was just our ability to communicate wasn't as strong at the time.
We had to learn how to co-host.
And then after we got done recording this episode was when we started talking about what we need to do as hosts together. And this is where we introduced the concept of yes and into the episodes.
We considered it almost like a debate platform where I think this. Okay, well, I think this.
Yeah. Episode 1-7, we realized we can't do that. It makes a lot more sense if we just do yes
if we're telling one story.
It becomes a lot more cohesive.
Yes.
So yeah, 1-7, put in the work, top 4.
And then, Pat Dog, we tried to recreate 1-5 a little bit. I really wanted to talk about the horrors of war and the scars people don't see. And then I wanted to develop and build out Patrick's while you're in there philosophy. Whereas you wanted to talk about the trauma, the PTSD, the healing, how he made it out. And then also how he views leadership and self-control and personal development.
Yeah. The Patrick episode was really interesting because I haven't talked to Patrick in probably 10 years.
And when we were 17, you guys probably said, hey.
Yeah, I was hella introvert way back in the day. So
is Patrick.
Yeah, this is the first time Patrick and I have ever really held a conversation in the past decade or so. So Patrick's episode was really good, and it was a great way for me to get to know him, especially since he's such a good friend of yours. I felt really out of the loop. I've heard stories of Patrick and you playing Magic together, but that was about it. That was kind of, I knew he played Magic and I knew he was in the military. I didn't even know what he did. I didn't know what his job was. I didn't know anything about him.
I think most people still don't know what his job is, which is hilarious to me.
I don't know if he knows what his job is.
So another thing I hate is mouth clicks. I can't stand those, and for some reason that's something that is very popular in the Mid-Ohio Valley. People click their tongues a lot. I think it's from the Appalachian, Irish, Scottish heritage of like clicking your tongue is like some old country shit. So hard to break the habit. And I'm editing Leon's episode now, and all three of us are doing it because we're from the same area. And so it builds. It has its own energy. That's why the episode, it started out with like a 2.5 hour recording. After cutting out all the unnatural pauses where we're trying to figure out how to communicate with each other again, I'm at about 57 minutes through, and our current timer is 1.5 hours.
Wow.
When I'm done editing, we're going to have like an 1 hour and 15 minute episode, like one of our longer forum discussions from 2.5 hours. So Leon keeps like, hey, I'm sorry that I was mean. All three of us were. We went ADHD, cranked that stuff up to 13. There are 5-minute windows that I had to delete where we went on a tangent, like I'm doing right now, where we started talking about something and we said, oh, wait, hold on a minute. That reminds me. And then 30 minutes later, we answered the question we posed, before. Again, you learn how to host a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's insane. Several of our friends have started podcasts since we started it. And I think that may in part be because if these idiots can do it, surely I can too. And I'm so grateful they have. And whenever I listen to their episode 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm also listening to our episode 1, 2, 3, 4, where we're doing all our ums. We have unnatural pauses. We're trying to argue over airtime instead of giving each other space. And it makes me happy because I hope they keep going so that they get to where we are, because we just broke 1,000 plays on Apple. We're about to break 1,000 plays on Spotify. We're bringing back on those experts who we had on episodes 12 and 13 because they loved having the conversation with us. We'll talk about it later, but that was some of our roughest audio. But they said, I still love that you put out my message and you did it justice.
Was I still editing the episode at this point?
I think at this juncture you were. I think it was around 8 or 9 where you started getting over what... Actually, no, I think it was 10 because I was depressed as shit through episode 10. And I still get the opportunity to overcome my depression every day. But today, I feel a lot better than I was at this juncture. Like, all of season 1, I'm super depressed. Yeah, we had those highs after every conversation where you know how it feels after an emotional release. After you cry, you feel amazing. I referred to it in one of the episodes as like post-nut clarity. Maybe even episode 8. I'm like, dude, why wouldn't you want that? And we get that after the episode when we're being open, honest, vulnerable, talking about what we're going through. And then we reflect each other's humanity and accept each other and continue to love each other. We feel happy and fulfilled because that's what our brain wants.
Yeah, definitely. Episode 8, Pat Dog. I think it still stands as one of our longest episodes.
Yes.
Beyond probably this upcoming episode that you just talked about.
We have a couple 115s, and I don't mind it.
I think this episode ends up pushing to the 130 area.
Oh, damn. So let's push on to 19. How about Don't Be a Creep, Tim?
This episode, I was so happy to bring on my sister-in-law, Kirsten, because she's really big into empowering women, and I love that. And I find it very interesting because she's from California, which I feel like is a very...
Progressive?
Yeah, liberal, progressive area. And even there's still tons of, like, women don't get treated the same, or they get, as the episode alludes to, creeped on, which I think is a term that's kind of made it out of, like, people's vocabulary these days.
Yes, people are supposed to be fully accepted. And one of the things that we're doing to challenge that mass delusion is saying, like we said in episode 4, I think, where Hyland and I spoke out against the guy who was like mistreating the wait staff. Episode 9 is us saying, hey, you should be aware of what's going on and you should be calling people out on their shit. If someone's being weird, we as bystanders need to be intervening and saying like, hey, do you feel safe? Hey, is that dude creepy? Hey, dude, what are you doing? Do you know that girl? Get the hell away from that girl. She ain't interested. She pumping gas.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the topic on this episode. I feel like it's something that a lot of people have gone through. What's really important too about this particular subject, when Aaron and I first started this podcast, we got a message from somebody who asked us to talk about I can't remember the exact verbiage, but they essentially wanted us to talk about women and children because they're more at risk. Oh, that was the term. She said at risk. And we thought that was a great idea because, you know, that's something that people need to talk about. But Aaron and I, we weren't women or children, and we weren't exactly experts. So
we needed to develop our sound. So we wanted to make sure we knew how to convey stories before we took on the first thing that someone asked us to talk about.
I'm really glad we ended up waiting to talk about this until episode 9, because at that point, we had already started finding our stride, our flow.
And we found a way to record guests, whereas episode 8, we had Patrick in person. And it took so much work to get 19 to work logistically.
Yeah, that's actually another really good point that you just brought up too. Is like, this is our first time having somebody do a remote recording with us versus in person, like with you and Patrick. Technically, your dad was remote, but it didn't work out that way because you ended up recording his audio in line with your audio, so you guys were the same track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was the first time that we actually had a guest on and 3 separate audio tracks to edit, which unfortunately is not how it ends up working out in a couple of the later episodes. But yes, Don't Be a Creep. It's actually one of our highest played episodes right now. I think the message resonates with a lot of people. Our audience is currently half and half men and women, which is incredible.
Yes.
I think the message does resonate with a lot of them, and I'm really hoping that we can bring Kirsten back on in a future episode and maybe discuss more in depth some of the topics that we mentioned on here, or, whatever she feels like talking about at the time.
One thing I love about Kirsten, and why when you said you wanted to bring her on, I said, of course, she is such a fun person. I met 100 people at your wedding. I remember Kirsten. I was like, she's team free will. She's gonna make a compelling episode because of her force of personality.
Yep.
I understood there were some things in the conversation. I knew that we had scored like a 95% on the test for episode 9. So after episode 9, I reached out to my friend Melissa, who's a sexual educator, and said, hey, I feel a little uncomfortable about this episode, and I don't know why. And she told me why. We unfortunately used some shameful language in the episode. We used the word clean when we were talking about persons affected by STIs and STDs, which is not appropriate nomenclature. So this was our first time reaching out for feedback, for constructive criticism specifically, and receiving it, which was a very important thing to learn, how to not only seek that knowledge and then deal with it once you get it, and then how do we send that feedback to Kirsten?
Right.
So that was a very complicated episode that we learned a lot of stuff. I think we've expressed that we're both extremely proud about that episode. The only thing I dislike is using the language thing that we didn't have the technology to avoid at the time. But now I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn.
And that's exactly how I would describe it too. We may have utilized the wrong terminology, but we've learned because we did it. And I love that. That's incredible.
And if you're not looking back and saying, I'm sorry for how I was, you're probably not growing.
Yeah, definitely not. So episode 9, Don't Be a Creep. Great episode. I loved having Kirsten on. I can't wait to have her on again. I love her energy. And I talk to her every week. She's always on the phone with Brittany, and I always jump into the conversation. She's just a fun person.
Yes. Episode 10, since I'm kind of the ideas and direction guy, after episode 7, I felt unresolved because we had moved on, but I was still in the midst of my depression. So even though it was 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, I was still having trouble getting out of bed.
Yeah, episode 10, Keep Fighting. I feel like this is a very empowering episode for you, Aaron, because it's almost like you're reinforcing to yourself not to give up.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely my corner man in this episode.
Yeah. And something else of note about this episode is this is the first time where we released the Be Your Own Light.
Is it?
Yeah.
So 110 is the street lamp.
Yep. This is where we started bringing in our
slogan.
Something else worth of note for this episode was when we started switching our roles and starting to define how we're going to move forward with the workload.
Yes.
At some point you realized that I was working all day, coming home, editing the podcast, and there was a day, I think, when the episode wasn't done in time to be released on time or something.
Yeah, it didn't get released till like that evening instead of... And so all day I was like, dude, where's the episode? Where's the episode?
Yep. And I was like, I'm still at work. I will message you when I'm home. So we swapped roles. Instead of me chopping and mastering, you took on the chopping, and I focused strictly on the mastering, which I'm pretty sure you can hear a little bit of a dip in quality because it was around Don't Be a Creep that I started taking the mastering from Hyland. And I am not an audio engineer. I have never been properly trained in how to use an EQ or what noises and frequencies and everything.
In this episode, I talk about the mindset grind set that I've always preached to my friends when you guys are going through a hard time. I'm like, dude, no one can beat you. Keep working. Push that boulder up the mountain again today. I know you have to do it tomorrow. I don't care. Push it up the mountain. We're all pushing a boulder up the mountain. If you think you can't do it, I'm going to beat your ass because you can.
Yeah, the episode is very
inspirational.
Yeah, I felt very inspired after. Hell, I wanted to go to the gym, and I think we got done recording at like 10 o'clock at night.
Yes, that sounds about right.
But it was great. Yeah, I love the episode. It's great. If you haven't listened to it or you dropped off around episode 3 or 4, please come back.
A lot of the people I've introduced to the podcast, I'll say, you'll know what episode you should start listening to. And I've had a lot of people listening to like Keep Fighting or Finding Balance or Leadership Theory. And it's what people need at that time. So yes, listen to our new stuff because it sounds better and we've gotten better. But whenever you need a pep talk, you should listen to episode 10.
Just come back. And then jumping up now. So on episode 11, we brought Patrick back.
In a slightly different setting. We had transferred from wherever the hell I was. I think I had a different bench. Yes, I had a different desk. And then episode 11, we kicked it back kind of to the lounge style podcast where you have like a group of people sitting in a room around a mic. So that the audio quality was a bit lacking because we were each 5 feet away from the microphone. But it was really nice talking to Patrick, and he just basically reinforced all of episode 10, and then we developed the philosophy.
So episode 11, I really enjoyed having Patrick back on because I felt like we only really talked about half his story. We only got to the depressing side, and we didn't get a chance to go to the side that ultimately I wanted to hear more about, which was how he's doing now, how he kicked all of that, and how he's turned his turmoil-filled past into inspiration for how he wants to move in the future. So I really enjoyed bringing Patrick back on. Again, I didn't know Patrick very well until we sat down to record 1-8, and then sitting back down with him at 1-11, it felt like sitting down with an old friend, which was incredible to me. So I completely get the appeal and why you're friends with him, Aaron. 1-11, it's a great episode. It's just, it's part 2 to 1-8, and it's just nice hearing going from life was sad and things were bad to life is great.
And I'm kicking ass.
Don't forget while you're in there, because that's a great philosophy.
Oh my God. I can't wait for his book that he talks about in this episode. Then we move on to a couple episodes where we talk to some phenomenal people and we don't do them justice. Melissa, I'm sorry. I know you're coming back and we will make up for it, but thank you so much for giving us a chance. Thank you for coming on the podcast and teaching us what you did.
So I'm going to say this here, and I'm going to also tell Melissa when we sit down and talk with her again, but people have told me they love this episode. Out of all the episodes so far that I've received feedback on, this one, if I'm going based off of what they're saying, would rank in at number 2, which is incredible. That her story, what Melissa has done in her life, what she teaches people, it's so unique. And she has such a way of taking that knowledge and feeding it to you in such a palatable way.
I am very excited. So episode 12 is the episode that changed my life the most. I started asking myself in my daily life, how does this feel? How does my body feel? Being present in my body. This is when I started to heal myself. I just had a visit with Dr. Green. He's going to beat my ass for saying that. My buddy Ben. I had a phone call with my buddy Ben where I talked about how my toes have started to grip the ground. I've started to develop hammer toe, they call it, from rollerblading, because I'm gripping the inside of the mold so that I'm gripping as I drive forward on my rollerblades. But because I'm present in my body, I realized I was starting to tense. So I called my buddy, because I always know a guy, and he said, yeah, I'm going to get a list of exercises you should be doing, which is probably going to be duck walks, those things where you squat all the way down and then fall forward to your knees and back up to bulletproof your feet. But because of this episode, my wife and I have sex all the time now. We're so present. The last time we had sex, I cried. Not like weeped after we had sex, but I've been so present during my orgasms that first they last like a minute now, instead of like 10 seconds. And I do travel to like different planets. I can't wait to hear more instructions, because just realizing that being aware is going to radically change my life. My orgasms went from like a 2 to like a 15. Like, it feels so incredible to be completely present and in my body, feel that bond. And I understand why all the religious things that I'm learning about, and how she said that sexual energy permeates all life. It makes sense. In Buddhism, they talk about the two parts of enlightenment are the red drop and the white drop, the male essence and the female essence, and the white drop is essentially the male reproductive product, and the red drop is the female reproductive product. And a lot of Western people see that as almost grotesque, but as Melissa said, she just needed information. She didn't need you to preach to her. What is a penis? What is the function of a penis? And I've realized that combating erotophobia is such a huge thing that I need to be doing within myself in order to live a happy and fulfilled life.
I'm in agreement with you here, Aaron, because I think this episode, having her on and the topic that we were discussing, it really did change fundamentally how I view sexual intimacy, and just being able to understanding the concept of reflecting somebody's humanity back at them, and how somebody can essentially be a mirror for other people. That was something else that changed in my mind too, because then I started thinking, how can I reflect humanity back to other people? How can I be a mirror? And not necessarily in an intimate manner, but just in general. And I think that that's something that I can take and work with as a leader.
As somebody who deals with chronic pain, how do you feel changed my life? Because I realized I can say, my neck hurts. Why does my neck hurt? Oh, because everything's tight. Okay, I need to stretch. I need to breathe. I need to elongate my spine. I need to relax. Let my body know it's okay. And almost all of my spiritual revelations since that moment, as an insane holy man or whatever, they've taken place in my body, which used to be a corpse. But now I'm present. I'm in my body. I'm here for it. And it's astounding. I can't wait to talk more to Melissa.
Me too. From a technical standpoint on this episode, there's portions of the episode where the audio sounds like it's being echoed. There's parts where the audio is like, you'll hear it and it'll be in poor quality, and then you'll hear that exact same audio bite later in a higher quality. It's just the editing was off on it. The whole way it was recorded was done poorly.
Because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
We relied entirely on Melissa.
Yep.
And that wasn't fair to you, Melissa. I'm sorry. Thank you for rallying and carrying the team. But now we know how to use Zoom. We use Zoom, which is what Melissa used. We learned how to record our audio separately. We learned that it's not going to work having different tracks with the same audio. Just logistically impossible.
There was a lot of things that came through in this episode that we didn't intend for it to come through.
The thing that I'm most grateful for after episode 4, my after action, Melissa was brave enough to send us a link about 10 ways that most podcasts can improve. During 12, we did some things that are essentially impolite as hosts. Either we were fighting for airtime, we were typing when she was talking, things like that while we were doing it, she was looking at us like, are you insane? Like, what are you doing? And now we know why. And she sent us that thing. And from episode 12 on, when she told us we sucked, essentially, she was much more polite. She's actually a professional. Please understand that I'm paraphrasing. We were honest with ourselves. We took that on board in a constructive way. Instead of taking it as an attack, we took it as an opportunity. After developing our vocabulary and saying, adversity isn't a bad thing. It's something that's difficult for me to grow through, but it will lead to positive results. So I want people to tell me how I can get better. And this is where we converted from talking about it to being about it. Unfortunately, at this time, I was up in West Virginia. I didn't have my rig set up, so the audio is real bad.
Fundamentally, this episode taught us a lot.
This was the most adversity we'd overcome, and this is where we learned the most. This episode changed us so radically that we became a whole nother podcast.
Unfortunately, everything we learned from episode 112 essentially went out the window in 113.
Yes. We wanted to so 112 was like, hey, you guys suck. Not exactly. Okay, 112, we recorded an episode with a very powerful guest. Melissa is a holy woman. She deserves all the deference in the world, and she's speaking truth, and she knows what the hell she's talking about. So when we went to 13, we said, okay, we're working with the big dogs, which means we must know what we're talking about. So no matter what we do, we'll succeed. So we failed to plan. And what happens when you fail to plan? You're planning to fail. So we executed our plan flawlessly, which was no plan at all. Luckily, we had a beautiful guest. Chaz is a phenomenal person. There's a reason he has hundreds of thousands of followers. And he's so busy that he hasn't listened to the episode. So I already apologized to him for like the quality and stuff. And he was like, I'm going to be honest, G, I haven't listened to your shit. And I'm like, cool, good. Please listen to the next episode we do with you in November.
Yeah, 113, be an improvinist. 1, I love the name. 2, I love the guest. 3, I love what we talk about. I hate this episode.
From a finish standpoint, yeah. It's hard to listen to.
It is. From an audio point of view, just listening to it, I feel like I'm so glad that Chaz is coming back on a future episode, because the stuff he was talking about, and I've received the feedback from this episode, and everyone has told me, they're like, yes, it is hard to listen to, but if you give the episode a chance, the knowledge in there, oh my God.
It's so worth it. Life-changing.
Somebody told me that every single parent that they know should listen to that episode. And I said, absolutely. When we bring him back and record another episode, they should all listen to that episode.
In the episode, we talk about how fundamentally important it is and life-changing. And one thing I love about editing the Leon episode right this second while we're talking about season 1 recap is 113 is our black metal. It's recorded on a potato, but if you sit there with the tin can to your ear, you're going to get gold. That episode is so beautiful and will change your life and your heart and your soul and will level you up in a spiritual way. But fuck, it's nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, if there's an episode that I would probably delete, it would probably be this one. I wish I could take the information from it, transcribe it into a Word document, and just post that up instead and be like, hey, don't, just read this.
Yes. Here's episode 13 in visual format. No need to look closer.
A lot easier to digest. This episode, I think, was when we finally put our foot down and said, no, we're figuring this out the right way.
Yes.
And that brings us into episode 14. So after putting our foot down and wanting to become better whenever we have a guest on, episode 114 rolls around with Jason Grooms from the Hangout Lounge. Another person I've never met. Absolutely loved having him on. But something very important that Jason introduced to us was this website he used, which it's called Riverside. Great tool for podcasters. It lets you record separate audio, lets you record separate video. And this was the first time we had found a useful tool for guests. It's like we looked to the universe and said, we need something. And then the universe delivered on 114 and provided us a new tool. That was exactly what we needed.
So 114 was very stressful. We were trying to do a special midweek release.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
We were trying to do a special midweek release. We were going to do a tandem drop with Jason. But after spending a lot of time with it and having a few complications with the episode we planned on being 114, this ended up being a regular Friday release.
That's right. I completely forgot that we had intended on doing this as a tandem release. Because we did have a completely different episode that we were going to put out. I forgot all about this, Aaron.
Yep.
And this is recent. This is like a month and a half ago or so.
But 114 is really where we said, we are podcasters. We are taking this seriously. This is going to be a refined product. And we kicked the pants off this episode.
Yeah, I really think this was the episode where, because we found our voice in episode 5.
Yes.
Episode 14 was where we found our podcast.
Yeah, no kidding. Good heavens. I think we're there, and that's why we've transitioned to season 2. Season 1 we defined as our pilot season.
Yeah.
It's the season where we were figuring it out. We didn't know how we were going to do the audio. We didn't know what mastering was. We didn't know who was going to chop the episodes. We kept saying, editor, cut that.
Yeah. Kept making that joke.
We learned
Joke.
a ton. Thankfully, we had the huevos to ask a professional, aka Melissa, what are we doing wrong? And she had the audacity to answer honestly. Thank God.
And I feel like we've been pushing really, really well since then. Yeah, so before we get to 115, Aaron, want to talk a little bit about the Shine Your Light segment?
We have a Shine segment where I bring on my friend Nicholas Brumfield, who has a master's in Arab Studies from the University of Georgetown, I think it is. Please go listen to the episode. But this is when the Gaza-Israel conflict was starting to pop off. And I knew I needed to be paying attention to what was going on. And the more I looked at it critically, the more it felt like it was going to be a genocide. And so I talked to Nick, and he was like, yes, it's like they're colonizing and taking over, and they're about to slaughter everyone. And my uncle would argue, but they elected Hamas, so it's their fault. And I say on the Shine episode, we can transport every Hamas person who wants to fight to like a desert out in Nevada or down into the Sahara, and we could have them fight every single person in the IDF who wants to fight every person who's in Hamas. But hospitals are being bombed. Civilians are dying. War crimes are being committed. The UN has nearly unanimously voted for a ceasefire. So this is a genocide-level event that is taking place during our time that we have the opportunity to speak out. I want to touch back for 1/2 second to Chaz. Chaz, I am so sorry that we were still learning how to host at that juncture and we were pretending like we knew what we were talking about, because at about 45 minutes, Tim and I start in with this stupid jab that is, oh yeah, that was something you brought up half an hour ago I wanted to talk about. Because he's so passionate, he was pushing through from start to finish, giving us the condensed version. And we were like, hold on, I wanted to talk about that. But luckily, after we recorded, Chaz was like, hey guys, I would recommend doing this. Maybe do it like that. Almost like he's a professional educator. So thank you for teaching us, Chaz. Thank you for working with us. Yeah.
And a professional. I mean, he's got his own podcast. He runs his social medias. Like, the guy knows what he's doing. He's got millions of followers, and we have barely 2,000 listeners in total on our podcast. So,
but we love you and appreciate you so much.
Dude, yeah, no, seriously. The amount of humble pie that I've had to swallow since starting this podcast and learning about how much I just don't know, it's a great opportunity. I love it. I'm so happy that I'm doing this.
Humble pie is so delicious to me. I love learning what I need to be doing better.
Yeah.
And that's one reason we're doing this podcast the way we are, is because we've realized there's a commonality here. If I want to learn to be better, so does my neighbor. So does my brother Tim. So does my sister Kirsten. So before we move on to Katie's Corner, do you want to talk more about Shine Nick Brumfield and how it made you feel, and maybe did you feel educated after you listened to the episode? Because Nick punches through a lot of information very concisely, almost like he's a true subject matter expert.
Yeah, so when I actually did listen to the episode, because I was nervous for the release, and I wasn't 100% sure what the episode was going to get into. So I mastered the episode, but during the mastering process, I can't focus on the topic so much as focusing on like
How it sounds.
actually editing. Yeah. So my first time listening was after I had already published it, and I was listening to it on my drive to work. And oh my God, it was absolutely incredible. Like, he hit every single major point that I had already learned about, provides so much information in such a quick manner. And it was concise. It was accurate. It was incredible. I mean, it's just like you said, he's a subject matter expert on it. He's got a master's degree in this subject. He knows exactly what is going on. And he's one of those people that whenever he talks about the topic, you should probably listen to what he's saying, because he's he's got his fingers so deep into that situation. And I'm always going to aim for a ceasefire. I personally, I've been wanting the Ukraine and Russia conflict to end ever since it started.
Yes.
Hamas and Israel, I want their conflict to end. I cannot stand hearing about civilians, innocents, people losing their homes, losing their lives. I hate that. It's so terrible.
And even though you and I signed up, we didn't sign a death warrant. We didn't say, I want to die. We said, I want to support what's going on.
There's a reason why I want to do security and police work. It's because I want to keep people safe. I don't want to do this to harm individuals. I want to prevent harm to happen.
Yes.
That's the whole purpose behind why I do what I do.
Yes.
So, yeah, after listening to that episode, I wanted to get so much more involved in figuring out how to ceasefire can happen and everything. So it's a great episode. If you haven't given it a chance, haven't given it a listen, it is up on Apple Podcasts. There was an issue with how it was released, but now it's figured out. Everybody should be able to see the episode just fine. So it has zero views on Apple. Just give it a listen.
One thing that Hyland and I have talked about since you listened to that Shine Spotlight was how frustrating it is that we can't get a hold of our elected representatives. I still haven't got through the White House call line. To be fair, I haven't called every single day. But the days that I have called, I've called 10 times that day during the few hours they're open. And really, they should be open 24 hours a day. Those are our elected representatives. I feel as though I should be able to go to DC, step onto the Congress floor, and be like, hey guys, my name's Aaron. Here's what I think. And it feels like the politicians are being separated into this other class where we're not supposed to ask what they're doing or what they're about or how we can communicate with them. But we need to realize they're people too. So if you want to vote for Aaron and Tim 2024, go ahead. We can take the reins and see how well we can mess things up. Because we talked in Leon's episode that's going to be coming out here soon about how the ego and pride, we always think we can do better than our forebears or our predecessors.
Like if you and I did, for some reason, get elected as president and VP, I don't even know how much we would actually be able to change and for the better, because there'd be so many things we'd want to change. And you kind of have to think to yourself too, like, there's so many smart philosophers out there and like people who understand how society works in general. Why aren't they the ones that's in office? So I don't know. The game's probably just rigged, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Yes, we're trying to figure out, and that's another thing, again, sorry that I'm promoting the Leon episode, but that's the thing we talk about. He says, I don't know what's next. I don't think I'm smarter than the people who came before me, but I know this doesn't work. So what do we do now? And the thing I want to do now, I want to talk about Katie.
Yeah. And that jumps now to our last episode of season 1. And this was the episode we had refined how we got our guest audio. We had figured out what we wanted to do as hosts.
And who's doing what as partners.
We had the job down. We had the format down. Everything was just, it was firing on all cylinders for this episode. This is a great episode. First of all, Katie, she's like family to me. She's part of my wife's life for the past couple of years, and they're very close. Her and Kirsten are best friends, and Kirsten is my sister-in-law. Katie's essentially my sister as well. And on top of that, too, I love her music. It's very relaxing, And Mountain Sound has become a song that I play regularly just because that feeling, that nostalgic feeling that we talk about in the episode, it's so nice. It's so nice. It makes me remember a form of West Virginia that I had forgotten about for years. Mountain Sound reminds me of why I loved West Virginia growing up.
Of the beauty.
Yeah.
This episode did a few things for me. One, it forced me to be a better host. That was one thing we really had to focus in on this episode because Katie has a label. She has an image. She has managers and directors and stuff. So she has to be putting out the right message. She has to be putting out a consistent message, and she has to have, checks and balances or whatever. Whenever we came up to all those professional things, honestly, I turned into a diva and I threw a fit. I said, F it, it's not worth it, just throw it away. And Tim said, no, Aaron, that's not how we produce a podcast. I got it. I'm glad that Tim did that, and I'm sorry for the fact that I threw a fit, but I'm super grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow. I love talking to Katie. I love the conversation we had. The things we needed to change were very minimal, and they're totally reasonable things that were asked of us. I just threw a fit because, as we talked about in all of our preceding episodes, it's hard to take feedback. It's hard for someone to say, here's what I need from you. And I am still maturing. As I've stated on, again, almost every episode, I don't have my shit together. I'm learning every single day, just like everyone else. The only difference is I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So I love this episode. I love how it sounds. I love that we kind of had that moment of realization where we looked at each other and we were like, dude, we're on to the next step. We leveled up. Let's go.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, Aaron. We learned so much from this episode. So you hit the nail on the head, Aaron. This episode it sounds incredible. I feel like I was firing on all cylinders when it came to mastering process. The EQ in it is great. So yeah, I think this episode would definitely get the gold star of approval from Hyland in the sense that I took everything that he taught me and just applied it the right way.
So now we've moved into season 2, which just means we figured it out. We're doing batch recording. We've got our schedule down. We've got our process down. We know who's responsible for doing what and at what timeline do we need to have things done so the other person can do their job.
And we're able to communicate these expectations to each other in a healthy and cohesive way.
Yes.
We're able to take these things and roll with them better than we were at the beginning.
And we're both understanding that we're both directors for this show. So we give each other direction. Hey, here's what I need from you. I need you to bring this energy this episode. Hey, this is our focus. There have been a couple times where Tim has got distracted with his cats and been doing something, and I've said, hey, Tim, come back to us. You're over there doing shit. And there are so many times where Tim has said, Aaron, I know we're killing it, but I need you to stay with me. I need you to keep showing up because he knows that once I feel like I've attained something, I feel like I can retire champion. But he's like, no, dude, for us to be champions, we have to put in the work in the gym every single week when people aren't there.
Overall, season 1 has been a massive learning experience for us. And I'm so very happy for this opportunity to be able to grow and put out this product that I'm proud of. And I can't wait to send out the episodes that we have planned for you guys because we're going to be bringing back Melissa. We're going to be bringing back Chaz. We have Leon on. And if you don't know who Leon is, well, you're going to after his episode.
You're going to learn today.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away, but how many episodes do we have planned out for the next season already? I think we're at like 15 episodes planned.
We have 15 episodes scheduled for season 2 so far. And then in our meeting minutes, we have other people who we've talked to who we really want to bring on the podcast, but we haven't had the opportunity to nail down a date yet.
We got so much stuff. And then on top of that too, we're starting to look into, and I don't know how much of this we want to get into, Aaron, But we're starting to look into merchandise, t-shirts, other things of that nature. So
Yes.
if you guys stay tuned with us long enough, you're going to see us grow.
Yes, and that's another thing that's changed with my verbiage through this. I no longer say that, like, we're going through things or we have problems. I say, oh, here's something we're growing through right now. My vocabulary has changed so much into one of gratitude, and my life has changed into one of gratitude. I know I listen to my religious texts incessantly with the Dhammapada, Tibetan Book of the Dead, and so on. But I really feel like practicing it, walking the path as I call it, is so much more important. You can study all day, but if you're not doing it, shut up. Get on the field or get in the stands.
Definitely.
So thank each and every one of you for coming on this journey with us. This has been phenomenal, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to grow through this with you.
I'm humbled and I'm so ecstatic. My goal has always been to at least help one person, whether that's teach them something that they didn't know or save their life in some way, shape, or form. That's all I've wanted to do. And I feel like I have achieved that. So could I retire champion? Yeah, I think I'd be very satisfied with what I've done so far. But I'm not going to. I'm going to keep pushing. I want to save one person a day now.
Hell yes.
So we cannot be where we are now without you guys, the listeners, our friends, our family, the strangers who find our podcast and listen to what we have to say. So thank you.
The thing that inspires me the most is whenever I hear people who have listened to our episode and made course correction. They say, I hear what you said, and I'm walking the path. When we talk about leadership theory, when people say, I'm putting myself in my subordinate shoes. Whenever Leslie said that she reconnected with her friend Heather, I'm saying, yes, please communicate with your friend. She listened to episode 4. Her friend Heather popped into her mind, and she finally reached back out to her college roommate. They've been on several, like, bro dates since, and they love spending time together. And that might not have happened had we not been open and vulnerable, talked about how much we loved our friends and how important community is to us. So that's the reason I send this episode to whoever popped into your head while listening for our outro for season 2, because I want you to reconnect. I want you to have your Sangha. I want you to have your community of people around you who are keeping you accountable and are making you realize that you're worth the love they're giving you.
If I could say a huge thank you to Hyland Markle, which I've said in, at this point, 17 to 19 episodes worth of recording. Huge thank you, Hyland. Seriously. I can't wait to talk with you and hear from your side about what it's been like working with us.
Oh,
but
God.
From my point of view, it's been nothing but a pleasure. I felt like I've gotten to know you so much more during this process. I have your phone number, which is something I've never had before in my entire life. And I feel like I have a celebrity's phone number, so I use it very sparingly. I'm too scared to text you and be like, hey, buddy, how are you?
One thing I love about the episode that we're working on now with Leon. So when Leon was introduced, it was like this ninja black belt who had spent 50 years alone in the desert and the mountains. I was like, that looks like a normal guy. And Chris was like, yeah, he's my neighbor. And that's how it is for Hyland. Like, we're presenting ourselves as these people who are learning stuff and figuring it out and going through all this stuff. And Hyland's like, I've seen him almost crap his pants like 5 times. Like, we used to race on bikes and he'd get mad if I won. You know, he used to be mad at me for this and that, and he did all this stupid shit. So I think it's really beautiful because a lot of our listeners are like, oh man, these guys have it figured out. But Hyland's like, these fucking idiots. These fucking guys. So hopefully he's mean at least once during his episode.
I can't wait, man. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So a huge thank you to Hyland Markle.
For the original music and for everything.
All the links are going to be in the show notes. Please go to our Facebook, like and follow, go to Spotify, subscribe, do all the things, and please share it, because the only way this grows is by you telling people about it. Tim and I can keep kicking ass and refining our technique and learning more. But the only way this gets bigger is if you tell someone. So if you believe in us, share us with someone.
Leave some reviews on Apple. It helps us a lot to get our name out there.
We do need that.
You know, rate us a 1-star or 5-star or anything in between, however you feel about the show. It's fine. It's just give us some community interaction because I would love to hear what people have to say.
Shout out to my boy Jake Myers. As soon as we dropped everything, Jake has supported us every step of the way. You've been kicking ass. He's bought your wife's coffee several times. Like, as soon as we dropped it, he bought it. And I can't thank you enough, Jake.
So be good to yourselves and each other.
We do sincerely and truly love you, and you deserve it.
And as always, peace!